Hello guys, welcome back to LR Anime. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of Battle Through the Heavens episode number 143 based on novel. So let's start. Water flow like splashing sound was emitted when the space became extremely distorted. As this sound spread, the rippling of the entire space also became increasingly intense. Looking at the energy seal, which was becoming increasingly illusory under the ripple, the eyes of the countless number of people outside of the Sea of Bones suddenly had a bright redness appearing within them. Even their breathing had become a lot rougher. They slowly used a greater amount of strength on their hands, which were holding on to their weapons. Xiao Yang's eyes were narrowed as he looked at the increasingly distorted space. Amidst the strange splashing sound, he could sense a wave of extremely frightening energy ripple. This kind of ripple was unusually fierce. It was just like a volcano that was suppressed at the crust. There was a kind of crazy gushing feeling to it. Crush. Another strange crushing sound appeared. The distorted space suddenly became still. Immediately one could hear a strange bang sound. The distorted space was actually blasted into countless of spatial fragments with a clang sound, appearing just like fragile glass. Charge. The ancient remains has been opened. The moment the spatial seal was blasted apart, the eyes of the countless number of human figures around the Sea of Bones immediately turned bright red. Their throat emitted a low and deep greedy roar. Their bodies became just like locusts flying by as they rushed explosively towards the middle of the Sea of Bones. Withdraw quickly. Compared to these people, who simply charge forward, Xiao Yang's expression changed when the space burst apart. He grabbed Zi Yang beside him and his toes pressed on the tree branch. After which, his body suddenly pulled backwards. Little Fairy Doctor and the rest also reacted quickly. They immediately pulled back without any hesitation. While Xiao Yang's group was pulling back, there were also quite a number of human figures from the surrounding large trees suddenly pulling back. Clearly, they had also discovered something. During the time that Xiao Yang's group was rushing back, the spatial seal fragments that had been formed from the blast suddenly paused. Immediately, one could hear a loud bang. A wild and violent spatial strength that would cause even an elite Dozun to feel their heart palpitate, swept in all directions like a storm. Those who were the fastest to charge forward were the first to be struck by it. Within the blink of an eye, they were swallowed by the storm. Immediately, sharp miserable cries resounded on this Sea of Bones in a ripple-like manner. The wild and violent spatial ripple annihilated those people charging at the front like it was cutting wheat. Some of those experts towards the back had also finally discovered that something was not quite right. Hence, the originally forward-charging sea of people immediately turned around and fled in a miserable manner. The Sea of Bones appeared unusually chaotic at that moment. Bang! Due to there being some distance, the spatial storm was no longer able to cause any damage to Xiao Yang's group by the time it had spread over. At this moment, the couple of them finally sighed in relief. Their eyes swept over the place and saw countless number of figures rolling on the ground and screaming miserably. Bright red fresh blood dyed a large portion of the dense white Sea of Bones. What a frightening spatial seal. It actually still possessed such a frightening offensive strength even after so many years. This is indeed worthy of being the remains left by an elite Do Sheng. A surprised expression surfaced on the face of Little Fairy Doctor's group when they saw the destructive force that this spatial ripple had created. Let's go, these fellows are too anxious. They deserve to be unlucky. Xiao Yang smiled. He waved his hand and his body transformed into a ray of light that shot into the Sea of Bones. At the same time, the many experts, who had successfully dodged the spatial ripple earlier, also moved their bodies, transforming into numerous blurry figures that rushed into the Sea of Bones. The Sea of Bones was extremely vast. Only after Xiao Yang's group had rushed in did they discover that there was a towering mountain peak-like large contour vaguely present within the Sea of Bones. Looking from a distance, it was as though there was an ancient fierce beast creeping under the Sea of Bones, causing one's heart to feel startled. Xiao Yang's group flying speed had involuntarily slowed greatly upon seeing the large contour. From the earlier spatial storm, they understood that this place was not a friendly one. If they were not careful, it was possible for them to even lose their lives in this place. Following their gradual approach, the white fog that was suspended within the Sea of Bones also gradually became thinner. That enormous thing also finally appeared in front of Xiao Yang's group sight. It was a large hall. It was a 10,000 feet large hall that appeared to be like a little mountain. Compared with this kind of large hall, the branch hall of the Hall of Soul that Xiao Yang saw the last time had become unusually tiny. A feeling of being tiny would suddenly be formed when one looked at this enormous thing that stood in this place. The large hall was bright red in color. Looking from a distance, it appeared as though a flame was rising from it, appearing exceptionally glaring amidst this dense white Sea of Bones. The surrounding experts were similarly absent-minded because of the vast size of this bright red large hall. It was a long while later before they recovered. They looked at each other and saw some shaken expression in each other's eyes. It was indeed worthy of being a place left behind by a Do Sheng. This grandness was indeed sufficiently majestic and mighty. Swoosh swoosh. Numerous figures gradually reduced their speeds before halting 100 meters from the bright red large hall. The large hall appeared even larger when standing at this place. At a glance, the top of the hall appeared to reach into the clouds. No wonder it must be covered by a spatial seal. Such a vast hall would be a glaring existence no matter where it was placed. Xiao Yang involuntarily shook his head when he watched this bright red large hall. He led everyone to slowly land 100 meters away. That elite Do Sheng from the ancient times would actually build such an enormous remains. It was likely that he possessed quite a rich foundation. It seemed that this trip would not be wasted. At this moment, many experts outside the bright red large hall continuously arrived. However, no one chose to take the lead in stepping into the 100-meter radius. Those who could arrive at this place were all people from large factions or who possessed great ability. Naturally, no one would be foolish enough to be the one leading the herd at this moment. Since these people were not anxious, Xiao Yang was naturally not anxious. It was likely that only a fool would believe that such a rich treasure did not have any defensive measures. While Xiao Yang was crossing his arms over his chest and waiting quietly, he suddenly sensed a pair of icy cold eyes being shot over. His brows was immediately lifted. He turned his gaze and immediately focused it on the origin of those icy cold eyes. The owner of those icy cold eyes was a lady in colorful clothes. Her noble demeanor set her off in a manner that no ordinary person would dare to directly look at her. Her phoenix-shape hair had also added some nobility to her demeanor. Feng Qing'er. Xiao Yang's fingers could not resist rubbing against each other when he saw this familiar face. It was unexpected that he could see her in this place. Quite a number of people were clustered beside Feng Qing'er. The people from the Wind Lightning Pavilion were amongst them. At this moment, this group of people had clearly discovered Xiao Yang's group. A densely cold expression flashed across their eyes. Xiao Yang's eyes swept over this group of people. After which, they paused on a spot beside Feng Qing'er. There was a tall white-haired man wearing bright clothes at that spot. The man was around 30 or so. However, this kind of age was undoubtedly young for the Heaven Demon Phoenix tribe. This white-haired man was extremely handsome. His smiling face caused him to appear like a blessed person. At one glance, it was possible to tell that he was not an ordinary person. Qing'er, is that the person whom you have said to have the essence demon phoenix blood? At this moment, the white-haired man also glanced at Xiao Yang and laughed in a faint voice. Yes. However, it is unexpected that after having only not met him for a short couple of years, he had actually reached the Dozun class. Feng Qing'er gritted her silver teeth and spoke unwillingly. Dozun her, after this, you will also be able to receive the inheritance from the tribe. At that time, it is not impossible to break through to the Dozun class. The white-haired man smiled slightly and whispered, as for that Xiao Yang, just leave him to me. Regardless of whether he possessed the demon phoenix essence blood, we will know if we bring him back for an examination. Even if he had already swallowed the essence blood, we will also have a way to refine it from within his blood. Feng Qing'er nodded slightly. Although Xiao Yang had advanced to the Dozun class, she had quite a great confidence towards the person beside her. The latter had received the inheritance earlier than her and was extremely familiar in using the inherited strength. He could be ranked amongst the top 10 even amongst all the younger generation within the Heaven Demon Phoenix tribe. It should not be too difficult to deal with Xiao Yang. Humph, there is a path to the heavens which you refuse to take. Instead, you have choose to barge into hell, which does not have a road leading in. If you have remained in the central plains, I might not be able to do anything to you. However, you have delivered yourself here. In that case, do not blame this miss for accepting it. A cold glint flashed across Feng Qing'er's pretty eyes as she laughed coldly within her heart. In the face of this icy cold gaze that Feng Qing'er shot over, Xiao Yang merely took a glance at her before withdrawing his eyes. He could sense the killing intent of that white-haired man towards him. Xiao Yang was only slightest surprised at the latter reaching the strength of a Dozun at such an age. The Heaven Demon Phoenix was not an ordinary magical beast. Being in possession of the ancient Heaven Phoenix bloodline, they also possess many ways to greatly increase the strength of their tribe members. On the whole, however, this kind of strength that was obtained by relying on their inheritance ultimately had some gap when compared with his strength, which was obtained from training. This kind of difference was not obvious when one looked at the surface. However, some clues would be revealed when one fought with others. With Xiao Yang's current strength, he basically had the confidence of being victorious when meeting anyone from the younger generation as long as it was not some specially abnormal existence. Back then, this was the case with Yi Chen. Currently, it would be the same with this white-haired young man. Xiao Yang shifted his eyes from Feng Qing'er. He looked around him and the expression on his face became a little interesting. This was because he had actually discovered quite a number of familiar faces from the various large factions that had arrived from all directions. Moreover, there were quite a number amongst them that had a great enmity with Xiao Yang. Wind Lightning Pavilion, Heaven Demon Phoenix Tribe, Ice River Valley, profound Shen sect. Xiao Yang's eyes swept over these factions with an enmity against him. In an instant, he involuntarily shook his head and sighed. This time around, he has really entered the wolf's nest. Xiao Yang's eyes swept over those enemies from the past one after another. His heart also let out a wave of bitter laughter at this moment. It was unexpected that these fellows would all be here. While Xiao Yang was watching this group of people, the latter had clearly also discovered his observation. Numerous eyes immediately turned over quickly. Their expressions underwent various respective changes. Humph, it is unexpected that we can still see this little brat here. Binghe Zunja from the Ice River Valley stared at Xiao Yang. There was a densely cold glint vaguely flashing within his eyes. Back then, he could only withdraw because he was afraid of the Jiyu clan. Otherwise, Xiao Yang's group would have long since been successfully captured by him. Currently, all sorts of people have gathered here. If I have the chance after entering the remains, I might be able to attack. At that time, as long as I do it secretively, even the Jiyu clan would no longer be able to observe it. Binghe Zunja gently turned the snow-white storage ring on his finger. There was vaguely some killing intent surfacing on his face. It really is the case of enemies frequently crossing path. He is actually able to meet this brat in this place. Hey, without the protection of the pill tower, the old me really wished to see how you can do anything earth-shaking. A ferocious expression flashed across the face of the chief of the profound Shen sect Zhentian Nan while he muttered quietly within his heart. Although these fellows hid very well, the vaguely present killing intent was still sensed by Xiao Yang. He knitted his brows slightly and felt a little troublesome. He was unafraid if it was just one of these fellows alone. However, if they were to join hands, things would become a little troublesome. It is unexpected that I have unknowingly created so many enemies. Xiao Yang and Little Fairy Doctor exchanged glances with each other. Their expressions were a little helpless. Originally, he did not intend to create so many enemies. However, due to various different reasons, he had ended up becoming enemies with these large factions. This was indeed something that he felt extremely helpless about. Hey, Xiao Yang? You are really here? A surprised, delicate voice was suddenly transmitted from a short distance away while Xiao Yang was feeling helpless. Xiao Yang was startled. He raised his head, only to see a red-dressed woman using a pair of beautiful large eyes to stare at him. The latter's beautiful appearance gave Xiao Yang a familiar feeling. Tang Huo? Xiao Yang's mind churned slightly and immediately recalled her. His brows was immediately raised. Since the young miss of the Burning Flame Valley had arrived, it was likely that the chief of the Burning Flame Valley, Tang Zhun, should also have come. Xiao Yang's eyes turned as he thought in this manner within his heart. He immediately saw the red-robed Tang Huo, who was beside Xiao Yang. The old man, who was full of smiles, was surprisingly the chief of the Burning Flame Valley, Tang Zhun. Cuckoo, young friend Xiao Yang, it has been a long time since we last met. You still appear as fine as you have always been. Tang Zhun laughed in front of the eyes of many experts around the. He led the experts from the Burning Flame Valley towards Xiao Yang, cupped his hands together and laughed. Valley Chief Tang is too polite. You have become stronger with age during these few years that we have not met. Xiao Yang did not slight Tang Zhun as he hurriedly replied with a smile. The Burning Flame Valley could be considered one of the higher-ranked large faction within the Central Plains. Tang Zhun was also a renowned expert. His action would naturally attract the notice of quite a number of people. Hence, Feng Qing Binghe Zunja and the rest involuntarily knitted their brows when they saw this scene. None of them had expected that Xiao Yang would possess such a relationship. Within a short 2 years, you have not only become the champion of the pill gathering but has even advanced into the Dozun class. This swift speed caused even the old me to feel ashamed. Tang Zhun acted as though he did not notice those gazes. His eyes swept over Xiao Yang and sighed. What he had said were some heartfelt words. When he had met Xiao Yang for the first time back then, the latter had only just advanced into the Dozun class. However, the next time they had met, Xiao Yang had already successfully advanced to a Dozun. This kind of training speed was indeed something that no one could match. Xiao Yang did not reply to Tang Zhun's sigh. He merely smiled, changed the topic and laughed. Has Valley Chief Tang also come because of the ancient remains this time around? Ancient remains are quite rare and the things left behind by an elite Do Sheng are even rarer. Since the remains has appeared, I will naturally need to come and have an eye-opener. Tang Zhun laughed. His gaze randomly swept around him. With his sharp old eyes, he was naturally able to tell that quite a number of big factions present had some enmity towards Xiao Yang. Young friend Xiao Yang, your current situation does not seem to be quite good. My luck is bad. Xiao Yang waved his hand and spoke in a casual manner. If there is anything that you need help with after entering the remains, you can just ask me. Back then, you have helped the old me refine a fire bodhisattva pill. The old me still owes you a favor. Tang Zhun softly replied. If it really comes until that stage, Xiao Yang will definitely come and seek your help. Xiao Yang smiled slightly and gently nodded. The reason Tang Zhen was willing to help him offend these strong large factions was partly because of the favor from the pill refinement back then, but a larger part was likely because of Xiao Yang's other identity. An 8-star alchemist guru and the pill-gathering champion. An alchemist guru was an existence that many large faction would fight to draw over no matter where he was. A pill refinement favor might not be sufficient for Tang Zhen to step forward at this moment. However, if one added this alchemist guru status, it would be sufficient. The Xiao Yang from back then might not be truly viewed by Tang Zhen like an expert of the older generation. However, the current Xiao Yang already possessed the qualification to be viewed seriously by Tang Zhen. Of course, it was difficult to tell whether things would develop to that stage. Although many powerful people were currently looking at Xiao Yang in a malicious manner, it would be difficult to say just who would win if they were to really engage in an all-out fight. Moreover, all of these fellows wanted to obtain the Tian class Do skill from the remains. Hence, it was unlikely for them to engage in a bloody battle with Xiao Yang's group before they obtain the Tian class Do skill. After all, they still needed to preserve some strength to snatch the Tian class Do skill. Additionally, if the Tian class Do skill eventually fell into their hands, they would have even less time to come and find trouble with Xiao Yang's group. This was because there would be an even larger number of people finding trouble with them. Therefore, despite this situation appearing quite dangerous, it did not reach the point where Xiao Yang needed to beg for help. Xiao Yang smiled as these thoughts flashed across his heart. He raised his head and swept his eyes once around him. Currently, the large hall had been occupied by a black mass of human sea. Moreover, based on the momentum, there seemed to be an endless human flow gathering here. Even though this was the case, no one dared to easily step into a 100-meter radius of the large hall. Bang! This kind of stalemate continued for around 10 minutes before the land suddenly trembled swiftly. The large hall, which had been void of any activity, suddenly created a loud rumbling sound. Immediately, everyone saw a bright red stone door that was weighed in tons suddenly being slowly opened. A dark black tunnel was revealed behind it. The entrance has been opened. The eyes of quite a number of people immediately reddened upon seeing this scene. Some people could not control themselves. They immediately moved their bodies and appeared outside of the tunnel within a couple of flashes. Immediately, they charged in amidst a loud laughter. The sea of people immediately turned into an uproar when they saw someone leading the way. Numerous figures flashed swiftly as they charged into the tunnel. Looking at that manner, it seemed that they were afraid that the treasures inside would be snatched by others before them. Compared to the recklessness of these people, Xiao Yang's group did not make any move. If it was so easy to barge into the remains left behind by an elite Do Sheng, it would indeed be far too much like child's play. The truth was indeed as Xiao Yang had expected. Soon after quite a number of people had charged into the tunnel, the dark black tunnel suddenly turned bright red. The hard ground was slowly split apart. After which, everyone saw bright red boiling hot lava spluttering out from within. At the same time, the walls of that spacious tunnel also suddenly spat out numerous demonic blue fire pillars. Anyone who touched these blue fire pills would be turned into a pile of ashes before they could even unleash a miserable screech. This sudden unexpected change had basically caused the people inside the tunnel to completely disappear in an instant. Those people who were about to charge in hurriedly halted their bodies in shock. However, they were still directly knocked into it by the people pouncing from behind. Hence, a sharp miserable screech resounded immediately. The exterior of the large hall was once again chaotic. The chaos continued for a moment before things finally calmed down. They faced each other and the greed within his eyes finally become a lot fainter under the threat of death. A mere fire path actually wished to stop us. While everyone calmed down, those large factions finally began to act. This fire path might be dangerous, but it did not possess any lethal threat to them. Soon after these words sounded, one could see many majestic Do-chi surging out. Immediately, the Do-chi lingered around their bodies as they transformed into numerous light figures that rushed into the fire path with a sizzling sound. This time around, those fire pillars did not immediately incinerate their bodies when they shot onto them. Instead, it ended up in a stalemate with the majestic Do-chi. With the Do-chi defense, these experts also hurriedly rushed towards the end of the tunnel. Of course, there was no lacking of some unlucky people who were swallowed by the flame due to their Do-chi being unable to keep up with the expenditure. Young friend Xiao Yang, you are in possession of a heavenly flame. It is likely that this fire path will not be able to stop your group. Let's move. Tang Zhen laughed after seeing everyone beginning to charge into the large hall. He waved his sleeve and the bright 9-dragon lightning flame surged out before wrapping around everyone from the burning flame valley. Xiao Yang also smiled upon seeing this. He nodded slightly and the purple-brown colored 3000 lotus heart flame swept out from within his body. It swept around and encompassed little fairy doctor's group within it. Tang Zhen by the side had a sudden change in expression when the 3000 lotus heart flame appeared. The 9-dragon lightning flame also trembled intensely. 9 fire dragons were vaguely visible on the surface of the flame. They were emitting a soft dragon roar, which contained some fear within it. This little fellow's heavenly flame, why is it completely different from the past? Tang Zhen's heart was incomparably shaken as he looked at the purple-brown flame on Xiao Yang's body. This was the first time he had seen a heavenly flame that could cause the 9-dragon lightning flame to reveal such an emotion. Valley Chief Tang, Xiao Yang shall enter first. Xiao Yang smiled. He ignored Tang Zhen's shocked expression as he waved his sleeves. His flame dragged everyone and rushed out and charged into the incomparably hot fire path. This fellow, he is really frightening. The purple-brown flame was wrapped around little fairy doctor's group. It was just like a fire dragon that arrogantly rushed out from amongst the countless number of people. It brought about some chaos as he directly rushed into the unusually hot fire path. After charging into the fire path, the surrounding temperature had clearly been raised by dozens of times. The surrounding hard bright red stones were burned until they were completely red. The hot lava below continued to splutter out like a spring. Those hot rock fragments contained in the lava also possessed quite a great lethal force. If he was careless, it might penetrate through the dochi and cause ones to end up being completely pierced. However, this fire path, which might be quite troublesome to the others, did not possess the slightest difficulty to Xiao Yang. With the 3000 lotus heart flame protecting the body, regardless of whether it was the lava or the surrounding demonic blue fire pillars that were shot out, they were unable to cause any harm towards Xiao Yang. The use of the heavenly flame was completely revealed at this moment. At this moment, there were quite a number of experts charging forward with all their strength. Majestic dochi covered their bodies until there was not the slightest gap formed. Although they were able to endure it and charge in, they were clearly not as relaxed as Xiao Yang's group. These blue flame possessed a mysterious effect of melting dochi. When the two were engaged in a stalemate, the rate at which one exhaust dochi would far exceed the expectations of many. Based on this rate of consumption, even an elite do zone would not be able to endure for long. While these people endured the flame and lava as they fiercely charging forward, they also saw Xiao Yang's group, which appeared to be progressing in a relaxed manner. All of their eyes were a little stunned. Xiao Yang ignored these gazes. A thought passed through his heart and the purple-brown flame withered. It left everyone behind as it swiftly rushed into the deep parts of the fire path. With the help of the heavenly flame, Xiao Yang's group advancement rate was quite rapid. Within a short few minutes, they had directly passed some of the experts, who had entered earlier than them. Even though this was the case, they were still unable to see the end of the fire path. It is indeed worthy of being the remains left behind by an elite do sheng. This fire path is actually so long. It looks like some people are going to be unlucky. Little fairy doctor involuntarily laughed softly when she saw this scene. Xiao Yang also smiled and nodded. The surrounding blue flame was extremely mysterious. They were able to melt dochi. Those who wished to rely on the strength of one's dochi to forcefully barge in would indeed be unlucky. Unless it was some extremely powerful experts, otherwise, those who could rely on dochi to pass through such a long fire path would be an extreme minority. Based on Xiao Yang's expectations, it was likely that just this entry fire path would have eliminated many people. Hey, isn't that the Ice River Valley's group in front? Tian Huozunja swept his eyes over the front of the tunnel and suddenly said. Xiao Yang raised his brows and took a glance upon hearing this. Indeed, he saw a large cluster of white-colored fog permeating the area a short distance in front. One could vaguely see some human figures within the fog. Xiao Yang was extremely familiar with those cold air. It was the unique icy cold dochi of the Ice River Valley. While Xiao Yang's group eyes were being shot over, Bing Hezunja, who was within the icy cold fog, also appeared to have sensed Xiao Yang's group behind. Immediately, he let out a cold snort. He waved his large sleeve and the cold air that wrapped around the experts from the Ice River Valley transformed into a cold glow. Its speed swiftly increased and disappeared from the sight of Xiao Yang's group. These terrible characters, are they running so quickly because they are afraid that we will attack them? Xiong Zhon parted his mouth and spoke with disdain when he saw this. Xiao Yang smiled. With their current lineup, they would not be afraid of an Ice River Valley. If they were to really fight, it was likely that the one who needed to be worried was Bing Hezunja. Let's go. I have a feeling that something is not quite right with this fire path. Let's leave first before talking. Xiao Yang's eyes swept over the surrounding blue flame. His brows involuntarily frowned slightly. Although this flame was not a heavenly flame, it was also extremely strange. Ordinary dochi would appear like a catalyst in front of this kind of flame. Not only would it be unable to extinguish the flame but would end up causing the flame to become increasingly fierce. Xiao Yang waved his sleeves after uttering those words. Their speed rose suddenly as they transformed into a fire glow that shot explosively towards the end of the fire path. Xiao Yang's group charged wildly for some distance while riding the fire glow. Along the way, they were able to meet some people, who had terrible expressions, alone. The thing that surprised them was that the people from the Ice River Valley had actually completely disappeared. The situation is not quite right. It is impossible for the speed of those people from the Ice River Valley to exceed ours. Little fairy doctor's brows were knitted tightly before she finally uttered in a deep voice a moment later. Xiao Yang reduced his speed a little. His eyes flickered slightly. After which, he raised his head and looked into the deep parts of the fire path. That place was still completely bright red in color. There was not the slightest trace of its end. This fire path is really too damn long. Is the end really in front of us? Xiongzhan also cursed somewhat impatiently. Xiao Yang was suddenly startled when he heard these words. He immediately lowered his body. Those eyes of his flickered, appearing as though he had understood something. He spoke in a deep voice, "This fire path is a trap. The path in front of us is not the true route into the remains. If we continue to travel through the fire path, the do qi within our bodies will be exhausted sooner or later. If this fire path is not the true entrance, where is the true entrance then?" Little fairy doctor raised her eyebrows. Her eyes also looked towards the bright red walls beside her when she spoke. Those walls were built from an extremely hard bright red magma rock. Even Xiao Yang's group was unable to identify just what this kind of rock was. However, it was definitely not an ordinary thing if it could be selected by an elite Do Sheng to build this remains. It was obvious that one should not attempt to break it with brute force. Xiao Yang revealed an expression of deep thought. His eyes suddenly shifted downwards a moment later. Finally, he paused it on the bright red viscous magma below and slowly said, "The reason why the members of the Ice River Valley had disappeared is likely because Bing Zunja had discovered the true entrance. However, the left, right and top of this tunnel are rock walls." "You mean, the path is not in front but below?" Little fairy doctor asked in surprise. "The owner of this remains is indeed cunning. Which ordinary person would leap into the lava for no reason?" Tianhua Zunja's face was similarly a stunned one. No wonder the members of the Ice River Valley was in a hurry to shake us off. They are actually unwilling for us to find the true entrance. Xiao Yang laughed. He gave a reminder to everyone before waving his sleeve. Purple-brown flame wrapped around everyone. With a splash sound, they directly entered the hot bright red lava. Xiao Yang's group swiftly sunk after entering the lava. Although the lava was hot, it posed no obstruction to everyone, who had the protection of a heavenly flame. Hence, after this sinking continued for around a minute, everyone could hear a slight muffled sound. The area under their feet became empty and they fell for a certain distance. Finally, their feet once again stood on the icy cold ground. Everyone hurriedly raised their heads to take a look after their feet landed. A shocked expression immediately covered their faces. The bright red lava appeared like numerous huge pythons above their heads. They adopted a ring shape as they hung above in a distorted manner. One could vaguely see some human figures occasionally rushing past the fire path. Clearly, this lava was the fire path that Xiao Yang's group had traveled through earlier. If one was to really follow such a long fire path, there was no telling just how long it would take to travel to the end. It is indeed deserving of being an ancient remains. To think that it has actually fooled everyone. If these people reached the end of the fire path after much difficulty only to discover a rock wall at the end, would they end up being so furious that they would die on the spot? Xiao Yang looked at the bending fire path and involuntarily spoke in a somewhat gloating manner. Little fairy doctor's group also involuntarily laughed upon hearing this. It seems that those who has entered in the past has never found the true entrance. However, perhaps it is because of the seal, but these traps were also not completely activated. Therefore, it had allowed some lucky fellows to enter, little fairy doctor reasoned. Xiao Yang nodded. His eyes swept around. The current location of theirs was an extremely spacious large stone path. The path extended for a great distance. It was possible to vaguely see a square there. There seemed to be some human figures on the square. "Let's go. This place should likely be able to truly enter the remains. However, our target is the soul baby fruit. We will let them go and snatch for the Tian class Do skill first. We will discuss about everything else once we have obtained the soul baby fruit." Xiao Yang mused for a moment before speaking in a solemn manner. Everyone nodded upon hearing this. "Once we enter the hall, the matter of finding the soul baby fruit will be left to Ziyang. Ziyang, you have a special perception when it comes to finding this kind of natural treasure. It will be much faster for you to search for it rather than all of us randomly doing so." Xiao Yang looked towards Ziyang and instructed. This is a small matter. Leave it to me." Ziyang nodded. She was extremely happy to take the initiative when it came to searching for natural treasures. Xiao Yang also smiled when he saw this. His toes pressed on the ground and his body transformed into a blurry figure that rushed towards the square in the distance. Little fairy doctor and the rest swiftly followed from behind. The path was not considered long. With the speed of Xiao Yang's group, they had appeared on the square after a couple of minutes. At the same time, they discovered that there were already quite a number of people who had arrived on the square beforehand. Most of these people were those who were the fastest to charge in. Amongst them include the Heaven Demon Phoenix tribe, Ice River Valley etc. The sudden appearance of Xiao Yang's group also attracted the attention of everyone on the square. Bing Zunja frowned slightly. Clearly, he did not expect that Xiao Yang's group would discover the mystery of the fire path so quickly. Xiao Yang ignored these gazes. His eyes paused at the edge of the square when he stepped into the place. There was an extremely heavy stone door at that spot. 10 straight spear-like bodies stood at that spot without any movement. The skin of these bodies were bright silver in color. Their eyes were hollow and they were expressionless. It was as though they were some old corpse. Earth demon puppet. The corner of Xiao Yang's eyes twitched involuntarily when he saw the existence of these corpse-like being. His heart was extremely shocked as he muttered. Xiao Yang was likely the person who was most familiar with this kind of silver puppet amongst those present. This was because he had also refined one of his own. Moreover, this current Earth demon puppet had already evolved until the Sky demon puppet stage. Those puppet outside of the stone door were completely bright silver. Clearly, they were still at the Earth demon puppet level. Based on Xiao Yang's estimation, these 10 Earth demon puppet should have the strength equivalent to the peak of the Dozone class. They could already be considered quite strong. However, it would be a little lacking if one wished to stop the many experts from the Central Plains with just them alone. Looks like the true remains is behind this stone door. Little fairy doctor looked at this heavy stone door and softly said, "Yes. However, the stone door is tightly shut. There's also a faint spatial fluctuation on it. Clearly, one cannot use brute force to open it. In that case, the method to open it would likely lie in these 10 puppets." Xiao Yang nodded slightly. His eyes swept once around and discovered that most people's eyes were pausing on the puppets. Clearly, all of them understood this in their hearts. Currently, there is no need for us to attack. There will naturally be people who will take care of this kind of thing. Tianhuazunja laughed. Xiao Yang involuntarily smiled and nodded upon hearing this old cunning laughter of Tianhuazunja. They stood randomly on a remote part of the square and watched the action of everyone present. While Xiao Yang's group remained quiet, the square experienced some private conversations and hesitation before a grey-clothed old man slowly stepped out. From his vast and mighty aura, he was obviously an elite Dozun. However, a glance from Xiao Yang's group allowed them to recognize that this old man was merely just a one-star Dozun. The sect that this grey-clothed old man belonged to was one that Xiao Yang had never seen before. However, he did not think too much about it. The Central Plains was extremely vast. There was an unknown number of hidden experts within it. The strength that some of the low-profile factions had was not much weaker than those renowned factions. The old man slowly walked out in front of the many gazes. Vast and mighty Do Chi lingered around him as he directly walked into the area surrounded by the 10 Earth demon puppet. That manner appeared as though he had an exceptionally great courage. Crack. When that old man was around 100 feet into the stone door, those 10 statue-like unmoving figures emitted a low and deep bone-cracking sound. Immediately, 10 icy-cold empty eyes directly stared at the grey-clothed old man. Their hands were clenched and silver light surged from them. 10 bright silver long spear appeared in their hand. Bright silver light flashed. The 10 figures were just like lightning as they carried a sharp wind and attacked the grey-clothed old man. "Ha ha, it is merely a couple of broken puppets. Yet, you are intending on blocking the old me." That grey-clothed old man laughed out loud upon seeing this. He charged into the group of puppet without any weapon in his hands. Majestic Do Chi surged. Each time he swung his fist, he would force a puppet backwards. Xiao Yang involuntarily shook his head as he looked at the grey-clothed old man, who was not at a disadvantage despite fighting against 10 alone. The gap between the Dozong and Dozun class was too great. Although these 10 puppets had successfully blocked the grey-clothed old man, it was obvious from this situation that they would not be able to endure for long. Silver light danced within the battleground. The grey-clothed old man directly forced 3 puppets back. His hand, which contained a deep yellow color, left a half-a-finger-deep palm imprint on the puppet's body. Roar. With their continuous defeat, the 10 Earth demon puppet suddenly paused their footsteps. Silver glow flashed in their eyes and a low and deep roar was actually emitted from their throats. Immediately, their footsteps moved in an orderly manner and immediately formed a strange formation. Silver glow flickered. Waves after waves of silver snake-like energy surged out from within their bodies. After which, they were directly connected to each other, forming a circular ring in the process. The moment the circular ring was formed, the leading Earth demon puppet's throat once again emitted a roar. Immediately, the silver glow weakened in front of Xiao Yang's stunned eyes. A little golden light gradually appeared. A moment later, the golden light completely replaced the silver glow. It has actually evolved. Xiao Yang's eyes involuntarily shrunk a little upon seeing this scene. He clearly understood just how difficult it was for the Earth demon puppet to evolve into the Sky demon puppet. Back then, the Earth demon puppet had absorbed a lot of pill lightning in order to evolve at the last moment. Yet, this Earth demon puppet had actually completed this within a short instant. It is the effect of the formation. No wonder it is something left by an elite Do Sheng. The strange formation of 10 Earth demon puppet together is sufficient to contend against a 2-star Dozun. This old fellow is going to be unlucky. Xiao Yang swiftly calmed down and softly muttered to himself after the shock in his heart continued for a moment. That gold-yellow Sky demon puppet in the battleground stomped on the ground. Crack lines spread while its body emitted a swoosh sound and appeared in front of the old man, who had experienced a drastic change in expression. His fist, which contained a golden light, was violently swung out. Faced with the extremely powerful fist, that old man hurriedly used all of his strength to meet it. At this moment, however, his natural and unrestrained manner was no longer present. The Heaven Demon puppet after evolving had a strength that was far from what he could imagine. Immediately, a deep sound appeared. A muffled snort was emitted from his throat and a trace of blood surfaced from the corner of his mouth. He staggered backward at the same time. After the old man withdrew by a distance of 100 feet, the sky demon puppet once again withdrew its fist. Its body flashed and appeared outside of the stone door. The golden light disappeared and it once again turned into an earth demon puppet, which stood guard at that spot. This kind of unexpected occurrence had also caused the faces of quite a number of people to change. They might not be afraid of 10 earth demon puppet at the peak of the Dozone class. However, this sky demon puppet, with a strength of a 2-star Dozon, caused them to fear it greatly. This thing did not possess any sense of pain. It was no different from a killing machine. There were indeed experts present who could finish it off. However, even if one defeated it, one would end up being greatly exhausted. Who would be willing to experience such an exhaustion before even seeing the remains? Those people present did not have such magnanimity. For a moment, the square descended into an embarrassing atmosphere. Everyone wanted to enter but no one was willing to engage in a life-and-death battle with these puppets. Xiao Yang narrowed his eyes. His eyes directly looked towards the 10 puppets. An expression of desire flashed across his eyes. If these puppets really only possessed the strength of the peak of the Dozone class, he might really not be interested in them. However, if they could reach a 2-star Dozon level sky demon puppet, it was a different matter altogether. Moreover, Xiao Yang was also extremely interested in the mysterious formation of the earth demon puppet. If he added his sky demon puppet into it, it was likely that the strength of the sky demon puppet would rise greatly within a short period of time. His sky demon puppet was currently able to fight against a 3-star Dozon. If he was to add these 10 earth demon puppets and the formation to aid it, it was likely that it could even fight against a 5-star Dozon. This allure was sufficient to get Xiao Yang to act personally. Help me keep an eye on the others. A silver glow flickered in Xiao Yang's eyes as he softly spoke to Little Fairy Doctor. His toes immediately pressed on the ground and his body rushed over everyone's head like a large bird and steadily landed 100 feet from the stone door. Since no one is going to attack, allow me to be the first to do so. This little fellow has taken the initiative to show himself. He definitely has some motive. Foam Chinga frowned slightly and softly said. The white-haired man by the side glanced at Xiao Yang's back and laughed. He actually slowly walked out and said, with your 1-star Dozon strength, you cannot even be compared to the first elder of the Ground Shen sect earlier. I think you should forget about it. Coincidentally, I am quite interested in these puppets. If I bring them back to act as door guards, it would appear quite domineering. This person's eyes were extremely sharp. He appeared to have seen through Xiao Yang's intention towards these puppets with a glance. Xiao Yang knitted his brows slightly in the face of this white-haired man, who had suddenly interfered. He immediately shook his head and said, this is not a matter you can be worried about. After uttering those words, Xiao Yang's foot suddenly pressed on the ground. His body directly charged into 100 feet radius of the stone door. Seeing this, the white-haired man also smiled. His body flashed and he also charged in. He waved his sleeves and a sharp wind was swung towards Xiao Yang's back in front of him. Xiao Yang's back appeared to have some eyes growing on them in the face of this wind that was headed towards him from behind. His body was twisted and he easily dodged it. A thought passed through his heart and the vast and mighty spiritual strength lingering between his eyebrows also surged out in all directions. After which, it transformed into thousands of parts that rushed towards those puppets that were emitting a silver glow. Xiao Yang had once created the Earth Demon puppet and was clearly aware of the weakness of such puppets. If it was a head-on collision, one could only end the battle after tearing them into pieces. However, Xiao Yang did not wish to shatter them. What he wanted was control, a control that was similar to that which he had over his Sky Demon puppet. The spiritual imprint of the Earth Demon puppet's creator was present within its body. As long as this spiritual imprint was removed and a spiritual imprint of his own was to replace it, he would be able to easily control the puppets. However, this kind of spiritual imprint was hidden in a very deep spot. If it was not because Xiao Yang had personally created one, it would be impossible for him to be aware of it. This brat is really intending to control the puppet. The white-haired man had also sensed it when Xiao Yang's spiritual strength spread. He was unaware of the method to control the puppet. Hence, he was unable to snatch with Xiao Yang. However, he was also not an ordinary person. Seeing that he was unable to stop Xiao Yang, he flashed his body and appeared in front of an Earth Demon puppet. A fist was violently swung and it landed heavily onto its body. Since he was unable to obtain it, he would destroy it. This video will end here. Thank you for watching.